Well, Michael Hanlon joins us now to help us better understand the day's events. He is a senior fellow and director of research and foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. Michael, welcome back. Let's stick with the Middle East first. Hamas says it has returned all the remains that it could recover. How credible is that claim, and what does that mean for the durability of this ceasefire?
Greetings. Well, first of all, I never trust anything Hamas says, so that's point one. But second, as the President of the United States alluded to a few minutes ago on your show with the clip that you played, it's hard to know exactly what kind of condition some of these remains would be in after potentially up to 2 years of decay. And also, of course, bombing in a number of the locations where people were located. So I don't necessarily assume all the remains can be found or recognized anyway. You may have to do very substantial forensic analysis just to know who might have been there. And so I think the key answer here is to find some way of doing further investigation, not trusting Hamas, but also not really distrusting them, because again, it's very hard in this kind of a war zone to keep track of bodies without electricity, without refrigeration, without who knows other means of preserving their remains over a period of months or years.
Yeah, it does seem very difficult, and as you said, would require forensic analysis. Also difficult, maybe this question to answer: if Israel does conclude that Hamas is intentionally withholding bodies, or if those public executions continue, how likely do you think it is that the fighting could resume, and what would that mean for the United States' role in enforcing this fragile peace deal?
I think the chances of fighting resuming would be very high. And I think, I don't know how to quantify the number, but it's certainly going to be, 25, 50, 75%. I mean, a lot more than single digits. As for what the United States can do, I like the fact that President Trump is willing to use American leverage and be tough with both parties here, including an Israeli prime minister. But I don't think that we call the shots. And I think we have to be careful to avoid talking ourselves into that. Let's bear in mind, yes, President Trump brought some good diplomacy and some good tools to this, but Israel had already destroyed much of Hezbollah, much or most of Hamas, much of Iran's nuclear program with our help, and reshaped the broader Middle East. And only then was Netanyahu prepared to negotiate a ceasefire, in addition to the short-lived one that happened earlier. So I could easily imagine this one ending fairly quickly as well. We're nowhere near the finish line.
Speaking of being nowhere near the finish line, I want to turn to Ukraine, which suffered heavy bombardment of drone and missile strikes overnight, targeting their infrastructure, energy infrastructure. Zelensky is getting ready to head to the United States, and he's going to push for Tomahawk missiles. Can you talk about what's at stake in this visit and how far President Trump might be willing to go?
I think there's a decent chance that President Trump will provide the Tomahawks. Again, you played the clip that had those words come out of his own mouth, that he's contemplating and assessing. I think it's a close call. On the one hand, Ukraine can already strike into Russia, but it does so with drones that have small warheads and relatively slow speed. Tomahawk has greater speed, greater range, greater payload, the ability to maybe take down for longer periods of time electricity production facilities or major oil facilities, maybe even military leadership or political leadership inside of Russia. And so for that reason, Putin's going to be very, very upset about this idea, but doesn't mean Putin gets a veto, obviously. He's more than willing to use missile strikes against Ukraine, to say the least. And so maybe the way to use this leverage is to try to at least get Putin to stop shooting his own big missiles at Ukrainian cities. I doubt he would, but if President Trump can make the threat credible enough, maybe we can back this thing down on both sides. My guess, though, is that it's going to be a close call, because Trump is going to be worried about offending Putin, a guy who he still wants to try to do a deal with, and also risking Russian escalation against NATO territory in the aftermath of these various Russian drones that have already shown up over NATO airspace.
All right, Michael Hanlon with the Brookings Institution. We always appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you kindly.